Covert Access Team podcast. Today we're breaking down the funnel, how to map it, when to move through it, and the critical role it plays in recon with CAT Chief Instructor Brian Harris. So, Brian, what is the funnel?
So fundamentally, the funnel is just the expected entry and exit route of employees, staff, and people into a target building. The funnel is at the surface, it's okay, yeah, everybody goes into the front door, everybody goes in the rear door, that sort of thing. But it progresses beyond just the entryway. So one of the most tricky questions when it comes to breaking into a building is, what is the expected route that employees or staff take from the entry into the building into wherever it is inside the interior, right? So one of the things that pops up a lot is buildings are kind of semi-opaque objects, right? You can see inside of them, but usually you can't see too far in. And the question becomes, when you see employees go into the building, is there a secondary or even a third layer of security? So maybe you see employees badge in, the door opens, they go inside. Fine. But then what happens when they go inside? Is it just that's all of the security, the one badge on the external door? Or is there a second layer of security? Is there a place where you and your team could go inside and loiter? Is there a place, or is it like a hallway where you all kind of get funneled into and you all have to do a secondary set of security? Maybe it's an extra badge or a retinal scan or a thumbprint or whatever. So understanding that expected method of entry that personnel take is very useful for when you're trying to think of entryways and routes into the building. And today we're just going to be talking about, basically, just that, the funnel, how you get into the building.
So how the heck do you do that before you get into the building?
So fundamentally, this is where you do all of your recon, right? So when you're running reconnaissance, typically the way that this works is that you do recon in concentric circles. You start off as far away from the target building, progressively getting closer and closer once you've gathered more information. So the 4 stages of recon in black teaming would be OSINT, which you can do from anywhere on Earth, right? You can't get farther away from the other side of the planet. Then you're going to do long-range recon, where you're going to be using telescopes or telephoto lenses or anything with great distance. Then you're going to be doing short-range recon, where you move around the target building without actually going inside. Maybe you pretend to be on a date. Maybe you pretend to be on a walk. Maybe you actually have a dog and you can walk a dog around the target building, whatever. Maybe you can sit at a cafe across the street, where you're really close to it, you're moving around the perimeter, but you're not going inside. And then lastly, you have embedded recon, where this is, can you get inside the building under real or false pretexts to scout out things from the inside? The example I typically give is, if you walk into a bank, going in to open up a bank account, that's a legitimate means, right? That's a legitimate reason for being inside the target building. But while you're in there, you can look for, choke points, you can look for security, you can look for badges, you can look for, cameras and alarms and PIR sensor. You can look for all kinds of things. You can do your recon while you're in there. And you can also start developing assets, which is something you should be doing when it comes to social engineering. But all of that said, you have to start off as far away as possible and slowly move, closer and closer to the building. But mapping out that funnel, mapping out how the employees move in, it can be tricky because not all buildings have the ability to go inside. Not all buildings have the ability to do embedded recon. And sometimes you have to do all your short and long range recon on your OSINT, but you can't get inside for one reason or another. Maybe it's a government office, maybe it's a secured building, maybe it's something that you just literally can't get into, like a power plant, right? Be very hard to do certain types of recon on a substation in the middle of nowhere. So these are the types of things that you need to try and discover. But the funnel is really important, because if you don't know, or if you have an assumption that there's only one layer of security, I've seen people badge in, the front door opens, they go inside. If that's all you know, and you decide, okay, well, I'll tailgate in behind somebody when they badge in, maybe that works. But what happens if you go inside, you round the corner, and there's a guard, there's a checkpoint, there's a one-way turnstile, there's a biometric scanner, like whatever. What do you do at that point? Do you turn on your heel and walk away? Do you just stand there and hope that you can somehow find a way through it? what do you do? And that's why knowing where these things are and what's inside the building, like the immediacy of the building, is very important.
I have so many follow-up questions. You covered so much in that answer. The first one is, with recon, you said there are the 4 types of recon, 4 phases of recon. How do you know when you can move on to the next phase safely?
Okay, so this is a very subjective question. So when you're talking about when is it okay to move on, as a team lead, your job as a team leader should be to help your team understand during OSINT, these are the things that we're expecting to find. These are the things we're hoping to find. And these are the things that we're going to get lucky to find. But you're going to do all this, right? And as a team lead, your team is supposed to find all, and you included, are supposed to find as many of these things as possible. But like all things, you're on a time crunch. So here's a common question, right? So if you're doing long-range reconnaissance, and you, as the team lead, have said, okay, during long-range reconnaissance, some of the things that we want to figure out, what time do the employees show up for work? What type of badges are they wearing? Can we get a really good high-res photo of their badge from the hide site that is the hotel room, where I've got a telescope and whatever? Are there different people who are coming in? Maybe some people are wearing blue badges and some people are wearing red badges. Okay, so you got a bunch of information you want to discover. A full day passes. And your team reports back to you, we only discovered what time the people show up for work and leave for work. All the other things on our checklist we didn't get. Okay, so as a team lead, do you say, well, screw it, let's just go in, right? Let's move on to the next phase. Or do you say, well, let's give it one more day? So this is a very subjective thing, but in my opinion, you should mark out at every stage, what do you absolutely need to discover? Like, what is critical? I cannot go farther. I cannot get closer to the building. So for example, when you're doing long-range reconnaissance, one piece of critical information, are there on-site guards, right? That's a critical piece of information. Another piece of critical information during long-range recon might be, what is the behavior of the employees in and around the building? Meaning, do people loiter outside of the building in kind of clusters? Do they all just funnel in? Are there gates? Are there, what is the funnel process of people moving in? Can you actually get closer safely? So, a typical example of this is that if you're doing a power station and you see that everybody drives their car up to a gate, badges in, the gate opens, they drive into an internal secure parking area. Well, then you probably can't do short-range recon because it would look really suspicious if you decided to walk your dog around the perimeter of in the middle of nowhere power plant. So these are the types of things that you absolutely have to learn. But if I can't get a high-res picture of an employee's badge, okay, well, maybe I don't need that necessarily. But like I said, this is very subjective, and this is where team dynamics and especially team leadership really comes in, because your team is going to be looking to you, say, look, these are the things we wanted to find, these are the things we did find, are we okay to move closer? Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask, how far into the building do you need to see before you're ready to enter the building? So that's a really big precipice, a point of no return kind of thing.
So this gets into something called front-heavy security. Now, I've talked about this previously. Front-heavy security basically just says that all the security posture in the building is usually clustered around the perimeter of the building at choke points, the front door, the rear door, the places where they expect people to be coming into. That said, there is an assumption that any person that has gotten beyond those points is assumed to be allowed to be there. So if you can make it, it's kind of like when you were a child, in America at least, there's a game, what is it called? It's like Red Rover or something, or it's a game where if you can get beyond a certain point, then you're safe. Like it's a safe zone, right? So everybody's trying to get you until you get past a certain point, and then, once you get past that point, you're safe. Well, in this regard, it's kind of the same thing. So the danger zones are when you're outside the building, but close, moving into the building, but then once you get into the interior of the building, once you get past those little choke points, you're safe. As long as you look like you have a purpose, as long as you blend in, and as long as you look the part, everybody typically assumes that you're just supposed to be there. It's breaching that perimeter that's the tricky part. So when you're talking about how far into the building do you need to see, that's what you need to see. Now, sometimes you can see that. Sometimes you can see through windows. Sometimes you can do embedded recon. Sometimes you can get that information. But sometimes you have to piece that information together kind of hodgepodge-esque. So let's suppose for a minute that I'm doing long-range reconnaissance, and I see all the employees at 8 a.m., and they're funneling into the building. And then I see them go into an area where I can't see, and then I see that there's about 5 minutes before I start seeing the funnel of people move, laterally, let's say down the hall to the right. Well, why is there 5-minute delay? Why is it that I see all the employees walk in, there's no badge reads, they walk into the front door opens, they walk in. But then there's this delay where I can't see them. But then all of a sudden they all start appearing kind of in the same conga line, halfway down the building on the right, 5 minutes later. It's like, well, it probably doesn't take you 5 minutes to walk there. So there's probably something there. There's some kind of security apparatus there. And another thing that you should
look... The coffee station.
Yeah, it might be. Well, that's another thing, right? If it was a coffee station, what would you expect them to have? Coffee, right? Yeah, exactly. So that's another thing. A lot of organizations will say, do not wear your badge outside the building. So if the employees are doing their due diligence and you see them walk into the building, nobody's wearing a badge. And then they disappear into an opaque area for a few minutes. And then all of a sudden you see them one floor up and everyone's wearing a badge. Well, that tells you something, right? But if they all have coffee, then that also tells you something. So when you're doing your recon, look for these little things.
Details.
Right, little details, because you're trying to piece together what is it that they're doing? Where are they going? What is their expected behavior as they're moving through the building? Because that's what you're really looking for.
Now, that brings up a really good point of, I think most people would be happy to hear that, the concept of front-heavy security, and if they can just get past that point, they're almost like safe. But how far into the building do you need to do recon? Is there ever a period of time where you're done with that phase?
Right. So again, this gets back to the intuition of the team lead. And it really does come back to the team lead, because the team leader will take all responsibility for this. If the team succeeds or fails, it will come back to the team lead. So the fundamental problem with this, and it's a lot of pressure on the team lead, because the team can do everything that they're supposed to do, but it will be up to the team lead to say, move in closer, do X, do Y, don't go in. And this kind of, gets back to the Leroy Jenkins problem, right? So let's say that you've got a teammate, he's walking around the perimeter of the building doing short-range recon, and oh man, there's a rear door to the building and it's open. Okay.
I'm going in, guys.
Is he okay to just go inside? That will come down to the team lead, right? So he has to give you authorization. So they have a heavy lift job. It's very, very tough. But when it comes to how far into the building you can do, in my opinion, you want to see as far in as you can, but you have to understand limitations, because most buildings, I would say 90% of buildings, you can see far enough in to see where all the choke points and bottlenecks are. You might have to get creative. Maybe you have to burn a teammate, right? So if you've got, now I've talked about this also before, burner teammates, right? So if you've got enough teammates where you have a cyber person, so let's say that you've got a team of 5 guys and one of the people on your team is basically the network hacker, right? So he's basically just sitting in the hotel room waiting for you guys to break into the building and plant a bug or planting a device, and then he's going to get on the network and do all the cyber stuff. Fine. There's no reason why you can't use him to burn doing recon. Because his role is not to get into the building. His role is not to social engineer. His role is not to pick the locks. So what you could do is you might be able to have him go inside the building. I'm lost. I'm a tourist. I'm looking for directions. I have a bladder infection. Can I use your toilet? Whatever. Now, yes, if he comes inside and he makes an idiot of himself, he can't come back because everybody has seen him.
But maybe making an idiot of himself is the point.
Exactly. So if he can go inside and he's wearing a hidden camera, or hopefully several hidden cameras, while he goes inside and he asks these questions, he may never be allowed to return again. But he got all the video. He saw all the choke points. He saw everything on inside. Now the guards or whoever might say, no, sorry, man, you can't come inside here. Okay, that's fine. He can't come back. But he got all the information you needed. So you might have to get creative. You might have to find ways or think of ways of getting inside. And it gets more tricky if your company has decided that in the best interest of them, well, you're going to do this job alone, right? Because that really does suck. And I've worked for companies before where they're like, oh, you're going to go break into a building and the team is you. That really, really sucks. But if you have the teammates, and when I say teammates, it can be anything. I have pulled project managers into the recon phase before to help me out, to give me cover or to be a burner or something else. Like, they don't have to be, whoever you're going to use as a burner does not have to be your super awesome, safe cracking expert. They could be anybody with common sense. Just, hey, I need you to walk inside and ask to use the bathroom. That's all you have to do. Wear a wire, wear hidden cameras. I'll show you how to do it, but I need you to go inside and do this. So if they're on your team, you can use them.
Now, just in answering some of the other questions, you've given some examples of things that you're looking for in terms of the funnel. Let's talk a little bit deeper about that. What else might you be looking for besides things like how long it takes them to get from A to B? Were they wearing badges here? Are they wearing badges there? Do they have coffee? Like those sorts of things that we've already touched on.
So one of the things that you want to know is, are there any places that you can loiter? Because if you go inside, now I've seen this both ways. Sometimes when you go inside, there will be an external pack system, like you have to badge in to get into the building. Then you'll go into the building and you will immediately be hit with a secondary, some type of security. Maybe it's a one-way turnstile, maybe it's a guard, maybe it's a handprint, whatever. But sometimes you go into the building, you badge into the front door, you go in and it's like a cafeteria or a lounge or a coffee area or a reception area or something like that where you could loiter. And then there's another door that goes into like a secured area. And this is usually what you find when you have buildings that are doing their due diligence, where you need a certain badge to get into the building, but then you need different badges to get into different parts of the building, right? So this is basically a flat physical network is a really, really bad idea, in the same way that a flat cyber network is a really, really bad idea. Everybody on your AD should not be able to go everywhere on the AD. That's like, you shouldn't be able to do that. Similarly, everyone from the intern to the janitor to the CEO probably should not all have equal access to the archive room and the server room and any place that you think is critical. So what some buildings will do is they will set it up so that every employee can get into the building. But then only certain employees can get into this stairwell or to this floor or to whatever, and they've set it up so that it's not a flat network. That's great. That's awesome. But here's the question. You, as the black team, are not going to probably know who's who has access to what. And if you do, are their badges different? Are they different colors? Like, it really sucks when the badges all look exactly alike and you can't tell which, people have access to which floors, because that can be tricky. But these are the kinds of things that you need to figure out. But if there is, in that funnel, if there is a place to loiter, a bathroom, a cafeteria, a coffee machine, anything, that is really helpful for you. Because you get into the building, then you can loiter, you can take your time, and you can assess the situation, and you can decide, should I push it? Should I just, because if you go into a building and there's a canteen, I've had this happen many, many times. You go into a secure building, and the first thing that you're greeted with is basically some form of a lounge, right? There's a coffee machine, there's a couch, there's a secretary's desk, whatever. There's like a loungy kind of area. If you're presented with that, go get coffee. Go get coffee. It's there. It's expected that employees sometimes will use it. Go get some. Go get some coffee. Use your cloak of invisibility, i.e. your phone, and just hang out on the phone and just watch. Clandestinely look around, watch, drink your coffee. If you need to turn on
have your phone camera on.
Right, have everything on, right? So if you need to turn on your heel, if you go into the office and you've been sipping on coffee for 5 or 10 minutes, you can use that. You can use that conversation. You can pretend to be having a conversation with somebody. Oh no, this thing, I forgot this thing in my car. Oh, my kid forgot something at school. Like, I've got to go give it to him. You can weave this tale so that anybody who's around you hears it, so it doesn't seem like you walked into the building and then immediately turned on your heel and walked out. That's suspicious. But if you walk into the building, you take your time, you're casual, you're calm, you sit down, you're having a coffee, you're on the phone, you're doing things, and then you get up 5-10 minutes later and walk out, well, chances are not the same people are going to just be sitting there watching you like a hawk for 5 or 10 minutes. They're going to go do their own thing. So it's not as suspicious. But if you go into a building, if the funnel doesn't have that ability, you go into the building, the second you walk inside, it's guards watching you like a hawk. It's a one-way turnstile. It's unclonable badges. It's biometric scanners. And it's all of these things in concert. And there's no place for you to loiter. Well, that does look really suspicious if they see you walk into there and then you turn on your heel and walk out. That is really suspicious, and you might have burned yourself by doing that. So this is why you only need to see as far into the building as where you think the funnel ends. What is the boundary between the front heavy security, right? Where is that safe zone? Because once you get past those choke points, you're safe. And that's where you really need to see. That's basically as far into the building that is, I would say, required to know. Everything else is nice. It's nice to know where the server room is. It's nice to know where this is. But it's not required. You can figure that out.
Do you feel like then it's also like a safe point may be those loiter opportunities?
Yes.
If you can get from, this loitering point to that loitering point, if
Yes.
you know everything that you need to do to get from one loitering point to the next, you could maybe do something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So the loitering part, so once you're past the security, the level of suspicion goes to almost zero. Now, it's not always at zero, but it's really low, right? Now, you can do stupid stuff to raise it pretty high. If the CEO walks into his office and you're in there in his desk, okay, suspicion just went through the roof, right? And this is why you should never do it alone. You should always have a buddy who's going with you. But, being a lookout and, using code words and what have you. But once you're inside, once you're past those choke points, you're basically in a safe zone. And yes, you can move from safe zone to safe zone if you need to use the bathroom, if you need to find the loitering area, because that's another thing. You're there because people think you're supposed to be working. But if people see you milling about and loitering for hours, and they've seen you loitering for like half an hour on this floor, and then they found out that you were also loitering for half an hour on the floor above you, and then you were loitering for half an hour on the floor above that, it's like, yeah, eventually you're going to start, because people are there to work, right? They expect you to work, which is another thing with blending in. Bring your laptop. Literally bring the stuff that you would use to write reports and stuff. I've been inside target buildings before writing the report about that very job while I'm doing it, because it gives me cover of status. If you can find these little safe zones, if you can blend in. I've literally had lunch at the cafeteria many times inside the target building, right? Because that's expected behavior. That's what people are expecting you to do. So do that. But the funnel, the funnel that you need to figure out is what is the expected route from outside the building to inside the building for employees. And just as importantly, what is it getting out? What is it getting out of the building? So I've seen this happen many times where somebody who's new to the game, they break into the building via tailgating, and then they find out, oh, I need an unclonable badge to get out. And oops. And it's like, okay, so what do? Are you just going to hang out until 5 o'clock and hope to God that you can tailgate somebody out? I've literally had people who've, locked themselves in stairwells, or they get into a building, they're like, oh, I need an unclonable badge to get out of the building. And getting out of the building, there's a one-way turnstile. Like, when I came into the building, the guards were, kind of laissez-faire, and I could tailgate in. But getting out of the building, it's a one-way turnstile.
That seems like a safety risk.
It is a safety risk, and only in the instance of fire alarms will those turn off, and you can just walk out. But so, this gets into fire codes and what have you. But this is the thing: is that you don't necessarily. This is why you need to do as much recon as possible. Like, when you know the funnel, it's how do people get in and how do people get out, because you don't want to find yourself, well, I tailgated in and now I'm trapped.
Yeah.
So,
And tailgating has worked out phenomenally well for me. It's honestly really effective, but that is an interesting con of tailgating. It kind of lets you skip go, as you were. You kind of skip ahead, and you may not have the information you need for something so important as getting out. So could we maybe talk about some of the other cons of tailgating? Well,
there's a lot of cons with tailgating. The biggest con, by far, is that you don't have persistence. So you might think you have persistence. Well, I tailgated it on Monday. I can obviously do it again on Tuesday, but you don't know that. Like, the person you tailgated in on Monday, maybe you get lucky and you find them again on Tuesday, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Like, you're rolling the dice. When you tailgate, it is a social engineering game. And for anybody who thinks that tailgating is not social engineering, try doing it when you look like a homeless man. Try looking and smelling like a homeless guy tailgating into a big, Fortune 100 office. It's like, it's not going to go well for you.
Yeah, and you could very easily burn yourself, because if you get a skeptical person who's maybe had a little bit of security training, who turns around and looks at you like, badge in, instead of holding the door open like you anticipated.
Right.
you have to be prepared for that, to be like, oh shoot, I left my badge at home and that looks really suspicious.
It does. It does look really suspicious.
You could burn yourself.
Exactly. So this is why I say never approach the building without an escape clause ever. Like it's the one thing you cannot go anywhere near the target building without. You can forget a flipper, you can forget an iCopy, you can forget a Proxmark, you can forget a lockpick, you can forget all the tools, but you can never forget your escape clause ever. Have to have it. But exactly. So the biggest con, in my opinion, of tailgating is that you're rolling the dice. You don't know if the person you're walking behind is going to let you in. You just don't. And the same person, the literal same person, may let you in on Monday and they may deny you on Tuesday. You don't know. So that's the biggest con, is the lack of persistence. The other con is that you can't use it to necessarily get in and out. You don't know. If you've tailgated in, that means that maybe there you need a badge to get out. Like, you don't know. And if the client has said you can't steal a badge, under no circumstance can you steal. Okay. And if they're running unclonable badges, like Desfire version 2, version 3, whatever, what do you do? Like, what do you do in that instance? If you can't tailgate out and you can't steal, what do you do? Call the client and say, well, like, I'm trapped inside? Like, what do you do? Dive out of a window? So, I mean...
You live there now.
Yeah, you live there now. So there are means that you can get out, but this is the kinds of things that you need to understand. Understanding how do employees move in, how do employees move out. Now, another thing that you have to understand about the funnel is that it changes. It may not always be the same. So the funnel at 8 a.m. may not be the funnel at noon. So at 8 a.m. when people come into work, maybe the funnel is the front door. But then at noon, maybe the funnel is, well, everybody leaves through a side entrance to go to the shopping mall across the parking lot for lunch, and then they come back in through that way. Okay, that's the funnel now. And then maybe at 6 p.m., the cleaning staff comes in through a rear entrance, right? So the funnel may not necessarily be the same all the time, but you do need to understand when people are going in and leaving the building, how are they expected to do it? What things do they need? And what is the route that they take? Is there places that you can loiter? Is there places you can turn on your heel? Like, what is that? What is the route that they're expected to take? And you need to figure that out. You really do, because if you don't and you breach a building and you round that corner and poof, there's a guard you didn't know about, or there's a one-way turnstile that you didn't know about, what do? I mean, and that's the whole point.
Yeah, and I feel like there may also be other ebbs and flows of it. Like, obviously there's the pattern of it, but also the mentality. Like, people might be a little bit more casual when they're coming back from lunch, or people might be a little bit more casual when it's a Friday afternoon, or different things like that might also play into it.
Well, I can tell you, like, so, this goes back into recon, and it kind of talks about the funnel. Like, the funnel is not just like the route. It's also kind of like the expected behavior of the employees, right? Are they holding the doors open for each other? Are they very militant about, like, no, you cannot tailgate in? I was doing recon on a job. I got called in at the last minute, and we had, I think it was 4 or 5 days. So they had a black team that was doing their best. They couldn't get in. They called me in. I came in. There was only like 4 days left in the assignment. And I asked them about as much information as they had, and they said that every single day the people show up, wearing, basically 3-piece suits, wearing, briefcases, these types of things. So as we approached the building on the second day that I was there, we're wearing nice suits. And as we're approaching the building, everybody's wearing like Hawaiian shirts, because it just so happened that was like casual whatever day. And suddenly we really stood out, right? So we had to like abort, and we had to just like walk off like we were going somewhere else, because it's like we didn't have the recon. We didn't have that information. And yeah, we knew the route, but again, social engineering, if you're moving into a building and everybody's wearing Hawaiian shirts and you're wearing a 3-piece suit or vice versa, you are really standing out. So, it's, even if we have valid badges, you still stand out. So you have to, like, knowing this, getting as much information as you can is very, very vital, which is why I usually say that recon will always take at least 50% of the engagement.
Gotcha. So what would you say is the biggest mistake people make when analyzing the funnel?
So the biggest mistake by far is simply ignoring it. The biggest mistake is when you have a junior or you have somebody who's really, really excited and they give in to the Leroy Jenkins phenomenon and they say, the door's open, I'm going in, right? That's the biggest mistake. Because you know nothing. It is a roll of the dice. You might go into that building and, hey, that's where all the security guards happen to take their smoke break, right? You don't know. You don't know what's beyond that point. The door might close behind you and, oh, hey, you're in a closet and you can't get out. You don't know. So, or you're in a rear stairwell that's alarmed to the hilt. Like you don't know. You don't know what's in there. So that would be the biggest mistake, is simply not ignoring it entirely. The second biggest mistake is assuming that because you see how people are moving into the building, you know any choke points beyond there. Because you don't. Like you need to try and figure out what is beyond. Now you don't have to go very far, but you do need to try and get angles on the building so you can see, okay, they went into the building, they had to badge from the outside, and then I noticed that they're badging to get into the stairwell. So like having these things, because again, what happens if you tailgate in the front door, but then you can't tailgate that same person into the stairwell, right? And what happens if you tailgate into the stairwell, but then you need another badge to get onto any floor? Like, what are you going to do? Tailgate the same person 3 times, like back to back? That seems really weird. So this is what I mean when I say that, you really need to understand what is the ingress place. And the 2 biggest mistakes: one, completely ignoring it altogether and just being like, hey, open door, open window, going in. The second biggest mistake is seeing what happens on the outside of the building and thinking, well, that's it. I know what happens on the outside of the building. They badge in. Okay, well, that's the whole process right there. And it's like, but it's not. It's probably not.
Sure. Now, how do environmental factors like, weather or urban versus rural settings and things like that impact?
Okay, so this is a really easy one. Interestingly enough, weather actually plays a big factor in this. So depending on the target building, if it is a really nice day, there's probably going to be a lot of people moving and coming in the office. If it's a really crappy day, really bad, let's take a bank, for instance. Let's say that your job is doing a bank. So your job, you've been hired to do a pen test on a bank. And your MO is that, or your thought is, I'm going to walk into the building and I'm going to blend in with the crowd and I'm going to use that to hop a turnstile and move inside. That's the plan, right? Well, if it's a really nice day in an urban environment, there's probably going to be a lot of people coming and going. But if it's pouring rain or the weather's really nasty, well, the employees will be there, but nobody else will be there. And you just walked into the building thinking you're going to blend in with a bunch of people, and it's just you. So there is, like, the weather can actually affect things, and you need to take that into consideration because, like, depending on what you're doing. If it's a rural environment, there's a very good chance that everybody knows everybody, much more than urban environments. So in urban corporate environments, you're usually talking hundreds of people, right? You go into a headquarters of a major company, 400 or 500 people, there might be 100 people in that office. Nobody knows everybody, right? It's really easy to blend in. But if you go into a small rural company, 20, 30, 50 people, everybody knows everybody. And beyond that, everybody knows everybody's car. So if you pull up to the parking lot and you've got a completely different car, people notice. So it's like thinking about these kinds of things ahead of time. It does play into it. It does, like, this kind of, like, one of the hardest, engagements I've ever done was a small company that had like 10 people. Because it's like, okay, well, that makes blending in impossible.
Sure.
Because now, don't get me wrong. There are really, really high security places that have been a huge challenge. But from a social engineering point of view, the small companies are really hard. Because if you've got 10 people in your company and you try to walk in there, everybody knows everybody. And you can't say, well, Bob hired me to come do X. No, he didn't. I know Bob. Let's go talk to him. That's tricky, right? It's really hard. Like, most of your social engineering tricks are off the table because everybody knows everybody.
Now, everybody loves to talk about tools. That's kind of everybody's favorite topic.
Sure.
What are the tools of the trade for this aspect of black teaming?
Okay, so in this case, it's all recon based, right? What we're trying to do is we're trying to map out the route that people are coming in and going out. So from a OSINT perspective, it's just the computer. It's just a computer with an internet access. Now, why might that help you with the funnel? Google Maps, for one. You can literally walk around most buildings. That's great. 2, LinkedIn or the company profile page. Look for holiday, Christmas, things that the company has put on, like, oh, we had a party at the office. People often will do, the HR, people, they'll often do, no offense, kind of stupid things where they'll show like, oh, we're having this great party, and they'll put a montage or something together where they're like walking through the building. That's awesome. If you can find on their LinkedIn page or their website or an employee where he's like, I did this thing. This is my first day in the company, and he's like, walk with me into my first day, and he's got a camera and he's walking into the building, and he's like, yeah, that's great. That's awesome. That shows you what the funnel is, right? So from the OSINT perspective, just an internet connected computer. But from the long range, it's going to be telescopes, it's going to be telephoto lenses, anything that you can see from a distance, right? This is usually you're going to find a hotel room, or you're going to be in the back of a van, or you're going to be, on top of a building somewhere, and basically you're just trying to look from as far away as you can. Now, in a lot of urban environments, if you can't find a parking garage or you can't find a hotel room with a view, long-range recon in urban environments is tricky. Because it's not really apropos to have a telescope inside of a city looking at a building, right?
Sure.
Especially if you're doing it all day. So that takes, it can be tricky. Now you can, if you've got a van with like super illegally tinted windows or something, and you've got a telephoto lens set up in there, or a telescope or something, and you're looking at it from like 5 blocks away, okay, and you've got a good angle on it, okay, fine, sure. But usually with long range, you want to get somewhere high up. You're on top of a parking garage. You're in the back of a van in a parking garage. You're in a hotel room. You're in a shared office place. This is another thing that you can do. Look for around the target building. Look for if there's any places where you could rent out like a shared office space, and then see if any of those overlook the target building. Because if I can pay to rent out an office space and I just go up there, close the blinds, and then I can, pop the blinds open, and I have that whole office area as my hide site for a day or however long I need, I can set up all my equipment, I can set up all my cameras, and whatever else. So things like that, right? And then when you get to short range and embedded recon, that's where you just get to your hidden cameras, basically. So hidden cameras, you can use button cams, you can use watch cameras. For the love of God, do not use a watch camera if you're in motion. You're like, you and everybody else will be seasick because you don't realize how much your arms move when you're walking until you're trying to watch something on a watch camera. It's obnoxious. But use button cameras, and often just use your phone. What I usually tell people is this: if you're going to do embedded recon, the phone is a cloak of invisibility. For social mores, we don't like to walk up to somebody who's on a phone and accost them, right? We just kind of, they're on a phone call. I don't want to be a bother. So, but what you can do, and I recommend you do this, be on a literal FaceTime call with one of your teammates who's screen recording everything. Because what they can do then is you are literally on a phone call. You're talking to them. You're having fun. You're telling jokes. You're doing whatever. And they're telling you is angle the camera slightly to the left. I think I see something. Angle the camera slightly to the right. I think I see something. And they're
Could you go look at this? Could you go look at that?
Right. They're directing you what to do, but because you're on a phone call and you're talking and you're chatting and you're not like trying to look around, it makes it very natural. And at the same time, if your teammate is screen recording the entire thing, you now have a recorded video of everything that you can show the team. Oh, well, Bob went into the building. This is the layout of the building. Here's the video. We can watch it. And if you do that same trick at night, because you're using a cell phone camera, you'll see the little pink glow of security cameras and other things, at distance. Now, you can definitely see security cameras easier with digital night vision, but it's still something that helps.
And I feel like in that answer, we inadvertently discussed a lot of observational techniques. In fact, in a lot of your answers, we've talked about observation techniques,
right.
Foot traffic patterns. We talked about guards. Are there any other observation techniques that we should discuss that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, oftentimes it's really just comes down to team dynamics. So team dynamics in the sense of like, hey, if Bob's the cyber guy and he's just going to be sitting up in the hotel room all day, I'm going to send him inside. I'm going to burn him, right? I'm going to send him inside wired to the hilt with cameras and sensors. And he's going to go inside and he's going to ask for the bathroom, or he's going to be lost, or he's going to be whatever. And he's just going to go inside and he's not going to push anything. He's not going to try and bypass security or anything else. He's just going to walk inside, try to talk to people, right? I mean, maybe he can hang out a little longer than he should, but he's not trying to clone badges. He's not trying to do anything. He's just getting in there to get intel, and that's it. So that's kind of where it comes to team dynamics. And also, using one teammate to be on a phone call while another teammate is directing him of, oh, hey, look up, look left, look right. But for God's sakes, when you do that, by the way, practice it first. Because if you're on a FaceTime call and you're pretending to be on a voice call, like a typical phone call, and you've got the phone slightly away from your head in any way, and anybody sees that, they're going to know exactly something's wrong, right? Because they're going to see the video. Mm-hmm. So you've got to make sure practice that. So you're not doing some like when he says
Grandpa doesn't know what a FaceTime call is.
Yeah, exactly. But so when your teammate says, "Hey, angle the phone up," you don't do some weird freaking angle thing, right? Like you can practice it, you can do it naturally and everything else, and you have to keep the phone married to your cheek the whole time, right? So you've got to or there are apps where you can be on FaceTime calls and you can also black the screen out. You could do that. Or you can just get a piece of black paper and you can, put it over it or anything like that. Blacked
Although
out.
that's like more suspicious is,
Well, from a distance.
But you could also get one of those screen privacy things where you can only see it straight on.
Exactly.
And the chance of them being able to see it straight on when your face is there.
Exactly. You can get anything like this, but you do have to practice it a little bit because otherwise your body language is going to kind of give you away. But at the end of the day, it's really just kind of comes down to team dynamics and trying to map that out. Remember, recon should always be at least 50% of your time. So if you've been hired for 2 weeks to do an engagement, at least the first week should be nothing but recon, right? Do not ever approach a building on like day one. You will probably mess it up. Your salespeople, your company will really, really be mad at you if they fought tooth and nail to sell a 2-3 week engagement and on day 2 you got burned.
Sure.
Right? They're going to be really upset. So do your recon, start as far away from the building as you can, progressively get closer, and then, you got to be smart. And this is where it comes down to having good leadership. Is it okay to burn somebody? Should they, if the door's open, should we just go in? Should we push it? Like, what do we do, right? And I will tell you this from running many, many teams over many, many countries, do not leave it to the juniors. Do not just trust them. They might be awesome. They might be your friend. They might be, whatever.
Learning.
Right.
And getting better every day.
Right. But if you just cut them loose and say, all right, go do your thing, go do recon, somebody will do something stupid and it will come back to bite the team. So just because it happens, right? It does. It just happens. Sometimes luck just isn't on your side.
So when it comes to the juniors, the new guys, how do you train new team members to recognize and navigate the funnel effectively?
Well, for starters, when you're talking about juniors, you should always be taking them on audits long before you're taking them on anything else. So I've always held, and I still held, that the best way to train a junior is not on an engagement, it's on an audit. So when you do auditing, basically the only difference between a black team engagement and a physical audit is with an engagement, you're trying to be sneaky, right? You're trying to sneak in, be covert, all that kind of stuff. With an audit, what you do is you show up at 9 o'clock in the morning, you go to the front desk, you give your real name, you show your real ID, you say, I'm here to do an audit. Everybody knows what the hell's going on. And all you're doing is you're moving through the building and you're mapping out every last possible weakness and vulnerability that you could have taken advantage of if you were running an engagement. And when you run juniors through an audit enough times, they start recognizing this is the funnel. This is what I should look for. These are the weaknesses. These are the things that are vulnerable. And they start getting really good at identifying that really quick. And then when they're on an actual engagement, they've had the practice. Because when you're on an audit, you can say, you know what? I bet that I could shim that. I bet I could shim that latch. Try it. I bet that I could use an underdoor tool and bypass that door. Try it. I want to see if that card is clonable. Try it. Right? So when you're running audits, you get an opportunity to try all of these things on live, real buildings. And so as a result, you get a lot of practice, but there's no stress. There's none of this stress of like, oh man, if I screw up even a little bit, the whole thing is over and everybody's going to hate me and all that. None of that exists. So run a lot of audits first. And plus, especially when you're a new team, you're probably going to run audits anyway. Like that's probably what you're going to sell more than anything anyway. Audits are audits are cheaper, they're shorter time, they don't require as many people. And most companies need audits more than they need engagements. The vast majority of companies are not ready for a live engagement for the same reason why most companies are not ready for a full-on cyber red team. If you come across a company and they say, yeah, we're rocking the most latest patched version of Windows 7 that you've ever seen, it's like, okay, well, you don't need a full-on DoD red team. Like, that's ridiculous, right?
You need a lot of other things first.
You need a lot of other things before we do anything like that. And so that's kind of like the whole point of an audit. And most companies need an audit long before they need actually an engagement. But that said, engagements are very, very important because engagements are fundamentally reality checks. They are the reality check for the blue team. And the blue team are great, they're very necessary, but if you let them get complacent, they suck. And that's just the way that it is. That's the way that everybody is. Everything from Navy SEALs to Cyber Blue Team to everybody. When you do the same thing over and over every single day, you will eventually get complacent. And when you get complacent, you will start making a lot of mistakes.
Speaking of reality checks and complacency, do you have any war stories of a time that you thought you had the funnel figured out and you got into it midstream and it turned out to be deceptively complex or unexpected and you're trapped in a man trap?
Yep, more or less. Okay, so there was an instance where we got into the building, and now to be fair, this was not entirely our fault. So we got into the building. They were using unclonable badges, but theft was on the table. So we were able to steal a badge to get into a building, which is great. Then we compromised the building entirely. We did all the things that the client asked us to do. We got into the super secret areas. We bugged the places we were supposed to bug. We elicited the things we were supposed to elicit. We did all the things. We had a meeting with the client on the balcony, so none of the employees could hear what the hell was going on. And the client said, "We need you to turn in our badge, because you can't leave here with it, because it's a very sensitive area. Like, we understand that you got it, but we need you to give it back." So we give the badge back. As the meeting is ending and we're leaving the meeting, the client says, "You know, it'd be really great if you could also actually break out of the building." And I asked him, "Can I get my badge back?" And he said, "No." So now we're inside of a building where they're using unclonable badges, and I can't tell you kind of the layout of the building because it would probably give away like where this was. But I will tell you that jumping out of windows was not an option. So there was no real way that we could get out, like by simply opening a window and going down a little bit. Plus, we didn't bring rappelling gear with us or anything else. So we ended up, there was a cafe on one of the ground floors, and we ended up using kind of a team thing where we distracted a girl to pickpocket her, sort of. Not really pickpocket her. She had her badge in a place she shouldn't have had it, and left it on the table while one of my colleagues was distracting her. I stole the badge, and we were able to get out of the building that way. Now, the reason why
Did you have to go back and return the badge?
Well, we walked outside where the client was waiting for us, and we gave him the badge. Now, the problem with that was that what I felt really bad about with that was that I found out when I handed the badge into the client that the person that we stole the badge from was being fired that day. So that made for a really crappy day, and I felt really bad about it. But yes, it does happen. You can get into situations where, here's another example. We cloned a badge. So this is a totally different experience, a totally different method. What we found was it was like super early in the morning, like 7 a.m. The really early employees would go to a cafe across the street. They would, have croissants and coffees and things like this before work. And it was interesting because we were able to clone their badges. But when we went to the front door of the building, the badge didn't work. But we saw that the employees were using their badges on the parking garage, the underground parking garage that all the people went into. So we used the badge there, and the badge worked. So we went into the underground parking garage with the badge that we could clone. But here's the problem, is that when we got into the parking garage, we needed a totally different badge to get into the building. So yeah, you can do that. So we were able to get in and out of the parking garage, no problem. But we needed a completely different badge to get into the building. So yeah, that like stuff like that does happen, right? But yeah, those are a couple examples of having that issue.
And can the funnel ever be too dangerous for your team to move through?
Okay, so it may not be that it's too dangerous, but it may. Well, okay, dangerous in this part is not like you're going to get shot, but dangerous is that you'll burn your team. Yes. So I'll give you an example of this.
What about getting shot?
Yeah, well, hopefully you and your team never get shot. But, there are a lot of instances where you're going to have guards.
Pay attention to guard behavior.
Yes, guard behavior is very important. So I was on an engagement a while back where the method of entry for employees was to go into the front door where they had actual armed guards. They were running unclonable ID badges. The guards were standing next to all the turnstiles. The turnstiles kind of look like a phone booth. One person walks into the phone booth, they scan their palm, then they use their unclonable badge, and then the phone booth kind of swivels and the door opens so that only they can go through it, right? So they step into a little kind of like a phone booth looking thing. The door closes behind them. They put their palm on a palm reader. They scan their unclonable badge. The door in front of them opens and they can carry on. And all of this is being watched by an actual guard. Okay, that's if they're running unclonable badges and you don't have a palm print that'll work, and you definitely don't have the time or the ability to like screw with that, like you can't start unscrewing the PAC system to try, like unclip the biometric wire or something. Okay, so that might be an example of it's too dangerous to go through that funnel, right? The funnel is go through that thing. But that's definitely an instance where that's not going to work for us. So you have to find something else. Maybe the employees use a different route at lunch. Maybe the cleaning staff uses a different route at nighttime. Maybe you're going to have to give up on that altogether and scale the building. Like, who knows, right? So these are all the kinds of things that you should be figuring out during your recon.
Now, that actually leads to a pretty good question. What do you do if there is literally no way to abuse any funnel?
Right. So if all the funnels, let's suppose for simplicity's sake, there's one funnel and only one funnel. Everybody, the cleaning staff, everybody just uses the same funnel. And for whatever reason, let's say it's exactly like I just mentioned, right? Armed guards, unclonable badges, biometrics, one-way turnstile. There's no real way to bypass that. Okay, great. In that case, that's where you have to actually breach the building, right? So that's where you might do some building scaling. That's where you might have to look for other routes of entry. Building scaling is
open windows.
Right. So building scaling is one of the things that I go to. So I've been rock climbing and such my whole life. I used to run a gym for years. I'm very comfortable scaling a building, but that might not be your MO, right? You might not have somebody on your team, or the company that you're running might be like, no, you're not. Because that's a common thing, right? Like, again, this gets back to the team lead. If Bob says, no, dude, I bet I could climb that 50 feet, side of the building and be just fine.
No.
Like, yeah.
No,
So,
Bob.
yeah, exactly, right? I've had students before. This is always funny. I had a few CAT courses ago. I had 2 students who were journalists, and then I had 2 students who were former intelligence and special forces. Now, on the final day, when I actually asked the students to breach a building, humorously, I always love to see how the students will do this. Now, the funny thing is that the 2 journalists
decided to climb the building.
Yeah. The 2 journalists say, well, we're going to call up the representative of the company and set up a meeting to do an interview and see if they'll let us into the building to do an interview so that we can just walk in, right, with a legitimate meeting. The 2 guys who were in intelligence, former SF guys, they were like, well, we're going to scale the catwalk or the emergency fire escape from the building next door, get onto the roof with ladders, and we're going to walk across the ladders to get onto the roof because we've seen that there's an open window on like the 10th floor. And it's funny because these are totally different means of getting into the building. But when you're figuring this out, there's a lot of factors you have to take into account. One, the first factor is safety, right? You're doing a test. Tests are never worth or risking your life or limb.
Amen.
So if you see, razor wire fences or other things, especially ones that have bends in them at the top, or anything that's going to be like spike type fence barriers, anything that could cause serious bodily harm, you always have to ask. It's like, yeah, okay, maybe I could throw a wool blanket over it. Maybe I could, roll over that. But is it worth it? The
answer is no.
Yeah,
no, it's not worth it.
Is it worth allowing one of your teammates to use a ladder to scale from building A to building B across the roof and that sort of thing? And oftentimes your company, the client, or your team lead is going to go like, no, you're not doing that. I don't care. So in that case, you might be the world's best climber, but if your team lead or the client says, no, you can't, well, then you can't. And also keep in mind, this is slightly tangential, but keep in mind that a lot of times, especially in today's environment, the client may not own the building. So if the client owns floor number 5 on a 10-story building, he cannot give you authorization to scale the building, right? He can only give you authorization to basically go in the funnel and to his office. He cannot give you authorization to, and even then, he might need to get authorization from the building owner to even do a pen test. So do keep that in mind. That if the client says, no, you can absolutely, scale our building. On floor 1 is IBM, and floor 2 is Microsoft, and floor 3 is Google, and we're on the 5th floor. But yeah, do whatever the hell you want. Like they cannot typically give you authorization to do that. So that's a big thing that you have to keep in mind.
Now, how do you adjust your approach if the target is highly aware of security threats? Say you did an audit, you've done, annual physical pen tests for the past 5 years. They participate in the CAT program quarterly, and everyone is very much on the ball for, intrusions such as yourself.
Right. Well, that is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to work yourself out of the job. So when you're doing this, the ultimate goal is to do your very best and fail. That, as weird as it sounds, that is your goal. For the same reason why, if you went to the doctor and he decided for whatever reason to run 20 tests on you and he comes back and says, good news, you're not dying, you don't have cancer.
You don't have anything, you're perfect.
Right, you're perfectly healthy. You don't look at that doctor and go, man, you suck. Like, you ran 20 tests on me and you didn't find anything? That's not a failure on the doctor, right? That's good news. So the ultimate goal here is to fail. That is, now, of course, you have to be professional. You can't be an idiot. You can't just bum rush into the building on day one. But if you do your due diligence and you fail, that's a good thing. But to answer your question, what you should try to do is you need to do all of the recon you can, and you might have to come up with completely novel ways of getting in. You may have to come up with really over-the-top, really kind of esoteric things that might get you in. Maybe that is pretending to be a reporter and running a story on the company. Maybe that is, scaling the building if it's allowed. Maybe that's pretending to be a homeless guy and sitting out front and trying to skim a badge as people, come into the building. You might have to come up with really wild things, because your goal is, as you work with your client more, you've done an audit, you've done a pen test, you help them with the CAT program, whatever it is. As that progresses, it ought to become more and more and more difficult for you. If you can tailgate in on a pen test, and then you come back a month later and you can do it again, and you come back a month later and you can do it again, you are failing at your job. I know that sounds weird and that's really harsh, but your entire job is to secure them. And if you've given them recommendations that are not working, you should be giving them new recommendations. Okay, you should be working with them and helping them to find a way that fixes the problem. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it's not 100% on you. If the doctor says, hey, stop drinking soda, and you're like, I'm gonna drink soda, you can't really blame the doctor. But at the same time, the doctor should be trying everything he can to make sure you stop. Mm-hmm. So similarly, if you just come in and you say, oh, well, tell the employees to not let people tailgate them, and then you come back 6 months later and tailgating is a joke, it's just as easy as it was before, you need to come up with something new. You need to come up with a strategy. And that's, going back to the CAT program and other things, you might need to come up with novel approaches and novel things. Mm. But the ultimate thing here is this. No matter what the security posture that they have, there's always a way in. I refer to this as the infiltration formula. So if you get a legitimate job at the company, you have no criminal record, you get a job as an intern, as a cook, as a janitor, as a software engineer, whatever, there is no way that they can stop that, right? So given enough time and tenacity, you can always get in. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So you just have to try and find expedient ways of doing that.
Now, are there any ways to manipulate the funnel to your advantage rather than just observe it?
Oh yeah, that's yeah. So this gets into some hilarious stuff where, if you are allowed to do destructive entry, which sometimes the client will be nice and they'll let you have some fun, you can destroy a PAX reader, or you can disable it. So if you pull a PAX reader off the wall, clip the wires, and then put it back on the wall, and everybody's coming in trying to badge in, and it's not working, suddenly the funnel changes. Maybe the security staff just says, okay, well, the badge reader has died for whatever reason, so we're just going to open the door. Maybe they're going to say, well, you have to use the side door now because the front door, for whatever reason, is broken. So you do have the ability to adjust the funnel to your liking. There are some RFID door handle-based readers, I'm not going to name names, where from the outside you can actually remove the batteries to the card reader. So if you do that, nobody's using that. Now, most employees, their first thought is, oh, I bet that the battery in the handle is dead or missing. Mm-hmm. That's not their first thought. Their first thought is, I'm trying to badge in like I always do and it's not working. Okay, well then they're going to have to go another route. They're going to have to go in another way. So if you're if your client allows you to do these kinds of things, yeah, you can adjust that funnel. You can change how they get into the building. You can basically make it so that they, they have to either open the door entirely because the card reader isn't working or the key's not working or whatever else, or they have to pick a different route. So yeah, that is a thing. Now, I'll give you an example of this. There was an instance where we had a client who we were allowed to do some destructive entry. We were allowed to do some, stupid stuff. And the front door had all kinds of security that we didn't want to mess with. Well, we talked to the client. We got authorization to do this. And we basically made it so that the doors wouldn't open. The exterior doors of the front door would not open. And as a result, now again, we got authorization to do this from the client. They had to let all the employees in through kind of a parking garage where there was no security. So as a result, we could easily get in through there, because there was no security, and we just had to manipulate the front door. Now, we had to only allowed to manipulate the front door for one day, but yeah, you can do that. Assuming, again, the client is okay with it.
Is there anything else on this subject that we should talk about that we haven't touched on already?
I would say this. Buildings are semi-opaque things, right? You can usually see a little ways into them, but not too far. When it comes to the funnel, realize this, that when you're outside the building, you're usually okay. When you're inside the building and you're past the front heavy security, you're past all the choke points, you're okay. It's a very, very narrow little area where there's high stress and you're likely to get caught. So just realize that when you're trying to breach a building, as long as you can bypass those security barriers, as soon as you get past them, you're safe. Now, again, you have to look the part, you have to dress the part, you have to act the part. But if you can get past those security barriers, you're safe. And realize when you're trying to map out these things, there might be multiple funnels. Pick the one that's most advantageous to you. If you got a 50 different types of security barriers on the front door, but the rear door just has a single card reader, use that, right? But you have to understand, you have to map out, is that a valid route, right? If you see a rear door, but it seems like the security there is really lax, but you've never once seen an employee go in that door, there's probably a reason for it, right? So you need to figure out what are the routes, how are people coming in, how are people going out, and do your absolute due diligence to try and really map out what is that funnel from start to finish. The funnel starts at the exterior of the building. The funnel ends when you've passed all the checkpoints. The funnel may literally just be the front door, but the funnel may also be the front door, the lounge, the stairwell door, and then every single floor beyond, like within the stairwell. You don't know. So it is your job to, when you're doing recon, one of the many, to try and figure that out, because it will really, really save your butt if you kind of know what to expect.
Well, that wraps up today's discussion on the funnel, how to map it, move through it, and use it to your advantage. Big thanks to Brian for breaking it all down. If you want to keep the conversation going, join the Covert Access Team Discord, connect with professionals, ask questions, and sharpen your skills with a like-minded community. DM us on LinkedIn for the link to join.